A large part of looking professional and presenting yourself well is being prepared, especially in an interview context. So in this video, I'm gonna kind of mash up two different things together. The first would be, what should you physically be bringing with you to an interview? What should you have on your person? But also, what are some other things that would be good for you to know going into this interview, other than just the stuff we've talked about before as far as actual questions that you may or may not be getting in the interview, things like, why do you want to be a firefighter? Tell us about yourself and stuff like that. So we're going to start out with what you should bring with yourself. Now, this is important because, again, it's not going to maybe make or break whether or not you get hired, but it's also how every little thing helps. And with these jobs, it's so competitive. So making yourself stand out, looking like you actually put some thought into what you brought with you, how you prepared, how you lay it out for everybody is really important. And it's the thing sometimes that separates you from other candidates. So what should you be bringing with you? Well, I recommend generally two things. But before I go into recommending those things, the first thing I want to say is, most importantly, if a department tells you, do not bring anything with you, that is not a test to see if you still will, and they want to see if you will go above and beyond. If a department specifically tells you, do not bring anything with you to your interview, do not bring anything with you, okay? Follow the instructions. If you show up after they specifically tell you not to do that with something, it will not reflect well on you. They won't look at it as you going above and beyond what they originally asked. They will look at it as you can't follow directions, and that's not what you want. Most departments won't do that. Most will just leave it open-ended. So what do I recommend you bring? Two things. Number one, I recommend you bring copies of your resume. Just make a simple, basic resume. You can Google that. Different templates. Generally, if you've never made a resume before, what it has is your name, address, and contact information at the top, your education, your work history, and any sort of extra skills or volunteer experience, things like that. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need anything ornate. Just simple, one-page, basic, to-the-point resume. Have that, as well as letters of recommendation. So letters of recommendation are good because it's essentially physical proof that someone else will vouch for you, for your reputation, for who you are, your work ethic, all that kind of stuff. Now, a couple things on letters of recommendation. Who should you get letters of recommendation from? You should not be getting recommendation letters from your friends or your family members. Leave them out. Good people to get recommendation letters from would be people like your current and former bosses. If you work part-time at a fire department, maybe that chief or an officer there. Who else? If you work in EMS, maybe a crew chief or a boss of some sort. If you don't have any experience, but maybe you went to school somewhere, maybe a former teacher or an educator, somebody that was in a position of quote-unquote authority that was able to witness what your work ethic was like, how driven you are, things like that. Get those people or request that those people write you letters of recommendation. Now, you don't need 10 of them. I recommend that if all you can get is one's fine. Definitely no more than 3. Because quite honestly, they're probably not going to read the actual recommendation letter. What they're probably going to do is see who the recommendation letter was written by and maybe just kind of skim over it. They don't really care about the details of, when you were in class and what you were like and all this kind of stuff. They just want to know that other people are willing to put their name and their reputation on the line for you. So that brings up another important point, which is, how should you present these things? Now, if you're going to be bringing resumes and letters of recommendation with you, I recommend that you package them in a neat and professional way. So you're going to want to make, I call them personal portfolios. You can go, and I'll put a link in below to Amazon. I'll find some. I don't actually have some with me, at least I don't think. But it's just a clear plastic folder, and it'll have like a plastic binding on the side, and put your resume with 2 or 3 letters of recommendation behind it, and that's one packet. Take all 2 or 3 or 5 or however many. Well, let's talk about that. If you don't know how many people are going to be interviewing you, make 3 and bring them and lay them out. That's perfect. Nobody's going to expect you to know exactly how many people are going to be interviewing you going into it. If by some chance you do know that your interview panel is going to be 4 people, make 4 copies. If it's going to be 5, make 5 copies. But generally 3 is a safe number. Nobody's going to be offended. Chances are they already have copies of your resume and your information and your background and all that kind of stuff. So if they don't get one, they're not going to be upset. Make 3, put each of those personal portfolios in one of those plastic binders, and then go get yourself something like this. This is just a leather bound, or I mean, they don't even have to be leather bound. You can get these at Target, Walmart, anything like that. I'll put a link to these on Amazon as well below. I think it's called a Padfolio, just plain brown, black. Put all 3 in here and bring this with you, and that is it. That's all you should have on your person, unless you're specifically told to bring something else with you to the interview. Your personal portfolios in here will look good. You'll look professional, you'll look clean, you look like you prepared. So the next question I get a lot in regards to this, and you saw in this thing, you saw the notepad. People ask me all the time, is it okay to take notes during the interview? And my answer to that is, I guess, I don't see why it would be bad, but also a lot of these interviews are going to be more conversational. There's really not a need for you to take notes. So maybe some of you find that comforting to know that it's going to be more conversational and you're not going to have to write down notes. It might look a little weird, especially if they're trying to have kind of a conversational style interview, if you're writing down everything people are saying to refer back. But if that really helps you and you really need that, okay, fine. I don't think that's going to ruin anything. So just know that too. And before we go into the information on other things that you should know going into this interview, if you find this helpful and you like this information, please give this video a thumbs up, give it a like. It helps the channel. It tells me that you're getting something from these, that you like the content, you find it helpful, and I'll continue making these types of videos. So other things you want to know going into this. I have some questions that you're going to want to answer. And again, I'll put them in the description below so you don't have to keep coming back to this video time and time again. But these are just some basic things that you should research to show that you did your homework on this city or on this district or on this area before you showed up for the interview. So I have my list here, I'll be referring to it. The first thing is look up whatever, if you're applying to a city, if you're applying to a district, wherever, look up what the general population is, especially if this is a district where there's multiple cities in one area. Look up what the cities are, what the demographics of that area are, what the median income of that area is. A lot of this, you can find most of this stuff just on Wikipedia. So this isn't tough to do. Look up the basic stuff of the population. Number 2, look up the apparatus that particular department uses. Now, this could be difficult to find. Some departments have websites that have, we have 4 engines and 1 ladder and 5 squads, whatever. They'll list that kind of stuff out. If they don't have that, it's not a big deal. Ask around, see if you can find out what kind of apparatus that they have, the types of calls they go on with those apparatus, things like that. Number 3, city size. What is the physical size of the district or the city that you'll be working in? Is this a huge area? Do they have 1 station? Do they have 5 stations? Where are those stations located? Again, really simple Google search should tell you all this information. You don't have to have this memorized again, but just have a basic idea in your head of what this city is laid out like, how big of an area it is, and how they cover this massive or small area. Major landmarks. Now, major landmarks could include physical, actual landmarks, but by major landmarks, I generally mean major areas. So, for example, where I work, there's a power plant, there's a part of a Ford plant, and there's a couple chemical plants. Like, there's some big stuff here in just the smaller city that I work. Stuff that you should just know about. You don't need to necessarily know the ins and outs of how they address those things, but just know that they're there in case they ask you about them. Pretty straightforward. Department functions. Do they do just fire? Do they do fire and EMS? Do they contract with someone for EMS? Do they have all paramedics, all EMTs? Right? It would look bad if you go in there talking about all this EMS experience you have and you don't even realize that they don't run EMS. So make sure you know what those department functions are. The number of incidents that they had in the last year or 2 years. Are they increasing? Are they declining? How is that going? How busy are they? How many fires have they gone on? How many EMS calls have they gone on? Again, you don't need to have all this memorized. Just have a good idea of how busy they are, about how many calls per day they do, things like that. Med control. If they do EMS, who's their med control? Where I'm in the Cleveland area, so we have the Cleveland Clinic, we have University Hospitals, and we have Metro. All 3 huge hospital systems. Who do they use? This isn't hard to find out. Just go ask around. Chiefs and the officers, Every department has a website that says who the chief is. At least know who that person is, know what they look like so that when you do see them, you will recognize them. That will look really bad if the chief walks in and you don't even realize that he or she is the chief of the department. Know who that is, know what their name is, know what they look like. And then finally, major incidents or major events of the past. Maybe they had a huge fire, maybe they had a big water incident, maybe they had some sort of, I don't know, maybe there's a big festival or something that happens every year. I used to work for a department down near Akron, and they had a huge music venue in their city. And every year they would have all sorts of major concerts at this venue. Just know that that's a thing. You don't need to know who the concerts are from, who they're by, how often they are. Just know that that venue exists, and that's a major event every summer. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, the links to the actual products like this will be in the description below. The list of all of those questions and things that you should go over will also be in the description below. Hope you found this helpful. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video.